all the costs of home ownership are going way up. And Americans, most of them, they don't buy the house. They buy the monthly payment. Doesn't matter what the house costs. What matters is what do they have to pay every month to live there? And that's going to go way up, even as prices go down. And of course, the falling prices creates a big problem for the people who own homes, who have borrowed against the homes, or a big problem for banks who have loaned against those homes. And now the homes lose value, and the guys that live there don't want to stay there. And now they have to sell these homes in a market where mortgage rates are way up, and so people can't afford to buy them. So it's a real disaster that's coming in housing, but it's not going to reduce inflation. Inflation is going to go up even as the economy goes down. So, the Fed has put us into a box, and there is no way out. And I've been warning about this for more than a decade. I knew exactly where we would end up. I just didn't know how long it would take to get there, or maybe the exact route we would take, but I knew where we would ultimately end up, and that is exactly where we are.
What is your solution to that? Do you think we should have never had QE? Should we just not have a Federal Reserve to begin with? What's the Peter Schiff solution to this?
Yes, we would be better off had we never created the Federal Reserve in 1913. But, it's possible that we could have created something even worse. But the way they originally envisioned the Federal Reserve wasn't that bad. The problem is they changed it, and because the original Federal Reserve Act, the Federal Reserve wasn't even allowed to buy U.S. Treasuries. It was prohibited by law from even owning them. And of course, the original Federal Reserve notes were backed by gold, 40% gold, 100% commercial paper. And the mission of the Federal Reserve was to have an elastic money supply. And what that meant was when the economy expanded, they would expand the money supply along with the economy. But then when the economy contracted, they were supposed to contract the money supply. But we don't do that. We do the opposite of that. What the Fed does now is when the economy is strong, they expand the money supply. And then when it's weak, they expand it faster. Right? So it's not elastic.
When that switch occurred? When did we start doing the exact opposite of the initial,
I don't know exactly, but certainly probably during the Depression, everything started, with Roosevelt in the 30s, and then really kicked into gear in the 60s with the Great Society programs and the War on Poverty and the Vietnam War. And, that's why we had the big outburst of, price inflation, in the 1970s. And it's going to be worse now. In fact, I think the last year or two was already worse than the worst of the 1970s, because when they go back and say, hey, inflation was 10, 11, 12% in the 70s, and it's only 7, 8% now, that's apples to oranges, because the CPIs are different. If you took the 1970 CPI and you used it to calculate the CPI today, you had the same metrics, we would have had 15 to 20% inflation last couple of years, much higher. Or if you took our CPI and brought it back and redid the 70s numbers using the CPI of today, they would have had inflation maybe no higher than 6, 7%, something like that. So we're already worse, but we're just getting started. And you remember, the way they were able to bring that inflation to an end was Paul Volcker in 1980, who allowed real interest rates to get to a positive 6 or 7%. The highest inflation got was 1981 at 13.5 by CPI, and we had interest rates at 20. We're nowhere near there. We're still got interest rates half the inflation rate. And where's the cuts to government spending? You're not going to rein in inflation without getting to the source of inflation, which is government deficit spending. We just passed this omnibus Freudian slip, omnibus spending bill. That's all financed by inflation. You can't fight inflation and create inflation at the same time. So I don't see any end in sight to the inflation spiral that's only now just getting started. And that's why it's so important that people act to protect themselves, because the vast majority of people are going to get eviscerated by what really amounts to a tax. This is how the government is paying for all the programs, all the spending. We're not getting anything for free from government. Everything government gives you costs money. And the way most people are going to pay for the cost of government is through higher prices. And we've only seen the beginning of the price increases that are coming.
So you mentioned the importance of fiscal spending there, and the Great Society, LBJ's big welfare push being partly to blame for the inflation, and then Reagan's welfare cuts helping to rein it in. So let's say Jerome Powell, holds true and keeps raising interest rates, but then President Biden, continues various stimulus programs, unemployment, welfare things. In that sort of scenario, could you get rising inflation, rising CPI, despite interest rates also rising, given what the fiscally what.
Sure. Again, remember, interest rates are another price too. I mean, if I'm a business, I've got raw material costs, I got labor costs, I got rent, and I got interest if I've borrowed money. And as my interest rates are going up, I mean, that's another cost that I'm going to look to pass on to my customers through higher prices. So all else being equal, rising interest rates are adding to the inflation problem. The way rising interest rates are supposed to slow inflation is by slowing spending and increasing savings. That's what has to happen. But that hasn't happened. If you look at consumer consumption patterns, they're spending like crazy. The savings rate is near an all-time record low. It has collapsed. And credit card debt, mortgage debt, auto debt, student, all-time record high. So the rising rates have done nothing to alter consumer behavior. And so they're going to do nothing to bring down inflation. The only thing that's happened is we've had a pullback in commodity prices, oil prices, other things that moved up the most, the quickest, they've pulled back. And so that's creating some hope that maybe we've seen the worst of the inflation and now it's coming back down. But no, those prices are going to consolidate and hit new highs, probably even this year. And the other thing that's causing some hope is that real estate prices are finally coming down. But that doesn't matter, right? Real estate prices are not even part of the CPI. What's part of the CPI? Owner's equivalent rent. So, and that still has a long way to go up. But the other factors that are there, utilities are in there, insurance is in there, maintenance costs are in there. All those things are going to go up. So even if the price of a house goes down, let's say a house that was $400,000 comes down to $300,000. It's actually going to be more expensive to buy the $300,000 house than it was to buy a $400,000 house a couple of years ago, because the mortgage rate is much higher, your insurance cost is much higher, your maintenance, your property tax. I mean, all the costs of home ownership are going way up. And Americans, most of them, they don't buy the house. They buy the monthly payment. Doesn't matter what the house costs. What matters is what do they have to pay every month to live there? And that's going to go way up, even as prices go down. And of course, the falling prices creates a big problem for the people who own homes, who have borrowed against the homes, or a big problem for banks who have loaned against those homes. And now the homes lose value. And the guys that live there don't want to stay there. And now they have to sell these homes in a market where mortgage rates are way up. And so people can't afford to buy them. So it's a real disaster that's coming in housing, but it's not going to reduce inflation. Inflation is going to go up even as the economy goes down.